The hospitals that were affected by this were losing $100 million a day.
In the event they do get hit, you want them paying for the notifications, not you.
With hundreds of thousands of small companies end up with a checklist of a super regulation where it's coming down from all the Fortune 500s, obviously the DoD space, and being that seemingly is what happens at United Healthcare and how Change Healthcare was affected. I think that's where the connection makes it really interesting for the SMB and mid-market.
Okay.
Boy, you're my Briz boy. This is the Nancy Pelosi connection here.
It's interesting.
She bought 14 million in call options to Palo Alto Networks on the day that they were hacked. And she later made $32 million on that trade. And that was before the hack was even announced that she bought.
A lot of things that Ross mentioned and that we've talked about today are things that are not as expensive as you think, in some instances are free to do today and can save your entire business in the end.
Welcome to the Ransomware Rewind podcast. She was literally not getting paid, and it all came down to this could be avoided just with the simple SOP. And if they would have followed that SOP, they'd be fine. But a lot of folks in the mid-market space just focus on the cheap stuff. Oh, I can get an MSP, and then that MSP is a guy in a truck that's setting up an old school ASA 5500, and that world's gone. And the mid-market needs to catch up.
Welcome to the Ransomware Rewind podcast. We have some great guests today. Ross Molina from Louis Brisboe. He's a breach and privacy attorney. And we have Matt Quammen. He's with Optimize Cyber. They specialize in pen testing, consulting, vCISO, backups, all the consulting services you need for your company. Welcome to the show. I think you'll enjoy. We're going to be talking about United Healthcare and some of the connections between the hack and the recent shooting of the CEO of United Healthcare. We might have some tinfoil hat stuff going on here involving Nancy Pelosi, who knows, how to protect you, your business, and your network from hacks, ransomware, any infiltration, and what to do about it after.
Thanks, Joe. Glad to be here. Matt Quammen. I'm the co-founder at Optimize Cyber. As Joe said, we're an offensive security consulting company. In the past, I've been on the ransomware incident response side, overseeing a large number of cases, and certainly is an area of interest. I got into security about 7-8 years ago and immediately fell in love with it. The beautiful thing is I grew up, my dad owned an HVAC company in small town Minnesota, and he experienced an incident where when he was going to sell his business, people stole some proprietary information to the company that drastically cut in half the valuation of that exit of his business and his life's work. So once I found out that's what we do in the cybersecurity space is we battle people online to help small, mid-sized, and obviously enterprise organizations prevent incidents like that from happening. It was just a match made in heaven. So I got very lucky to find my way into security and having a lot of fun along the way. Got the chance to meet Ross years ago working incident responses together. Ross, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. My name is Ross Molina. I'm a cybersecurity and data privacy attorney here at Louis Brisboe, vice chair of our group. I used to do something totally different. I was a litigator. Didn't find it personally rewarding. I had a chance to come into this space, and it has been fantastic. My main practice revolves around hopping in when companies, large and small, are at their worst, right? They've been hit with an attack. We get to hop in. We get to help them through from the starting line all the way through the finish line, get them back up and running, make sure they're secure, try to keep this from happening again. We also help them with any notifications to individuals and regulators along the way. So it's really rewarding to hop in and be able to help companies in their time of need. Obviously, it's not a fun process of what they're going through, but we enjoy working with them and helping with them. So great, very happy that I've made this transition and couldn't see it another way. You want to introduce yourself?
So it's Mike Dowdy, and I was former president of 2 regional telco data centers. And within that space, you can actually see what's going on with the data. And over time, I got more and more involved in the security side. And I went over to RapidScale because everything went over to the cloud, and RapidScale's focus is on managing the security in the cloud environments. And I got passionate about it when I had several situations where folks were about to get compromised. And we're able to say, hey, you're getting these DDoS attacks, you're getting everything on the dark web where you're going to get attacked. And they actually listened to us and avoided losing everything. So that I found really rewarding. And then, Joe, I've known you for a long time, back into the data center. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Joe Erle here with C3 Insurance. I do cyber and tech insurance for companies. So if they have a service interruption, if they get ransomed, we're the ones that pay the bills for people like Matt and Ross, so that you can get the best people on your team when you get hacked and get back to business right away. So I wanted to talk a little bit about United Healthcare. It was almost a year ago that this healthcare company, Change Healthcare, had one of the biggest hacks in US history. Matt, you want to tell us a little background?
Yeah, absolutely. All this is public reporting, and there's been good reporting on it. So I wasn't involved in anything to do with United Healthcare, but public reporting states that in Q1 of last year there was a ransomware event at United Healthcare. Subsequently, I'm kind of fast forwarding here, but the team had to be in front of the go meet their congressmen and women and share some of the details about this incident. But sounds like there was a ransom paid. They got and they moved along much quicker. But the real pain in this incident was a reinfection, we referred to it as, but a ransomware reinfection within I believe 8 weeks, still in Q1 of this past year. And Change Healthcare, who are benefits managers and manage payments out to pharmacists, mental health care providers, all the people in the supply chain downstream of somebody the size of United Healthcare. This was where the real pain was felt by the country, because hundreds of thousands of organizations were affected downstream and had their businesses interrupted as well. So this isn't quite the catastrophic event that people have all been modeling for. That would be more along the lines of, let's say, AWS is out for 3 months, something real catastrophic for American businesses. But it interrupted payments to so many people that there's a lot of online stories about clinics that had to close their doors or sell because they couldn't operate for a period of some people as long as 6 months interrupted in payments. So the big lesson from this is auditing your supply chain, looking at dependencies. Who do you depend on and who depends on you? Because excuse me, all those other organizations in your outside of your own that you're doing business with, it becomes additional attack vectors. And the bad guys aren't stupid. They know that if they can interrupt billions of dollars of business, there's going to be a bigger ransom payout to them. So Ross, how do you guys handle it in cases when there's these kinds of dependencies and other entities affected?
I think you bring up a good point, right? Is I think most companies look internally, they look at themselves and they don't really notice, hey, where else are we vulnerable? And I think, for instance, a lot of healthcare providers have been awoken by the fact that, hey, it's not just us got thrown out the door, right? Once you see a large scale breach like this. And so not only do you have to keep yourself secure, but you also need to keep, for instance, dentists, healthcare providers, hospital chains, they bring in third parties all the time to maintain their own data. You're opening yourself up there, right? You can have BAAs, you can have all kinds of things, but what is in the BAA? For instance, something that's never really talked about is notification costs. In this case, luckily, the notifications were handled for all of these groups, but there's a lot of BAAs that we see that don't include notification on the business associate if the business associate gets hacked. And so what we advise on our end is yes, get your network secure. Make sure you're dealing with people that have their network secure. Have contracts in place where if you're farming out your PHI to other groups, make sure that BAA includes a notice provision where if the business associate gets hit, they're also required to notify on your behalf.
Describe those acronyms for our listeners that.
So BAA is a business associate agreement. So a lot of times covered entities, healthcare providers, will have an agreement in place for the protection of medical records, for instance, or medical billing. They'll send medical treatment information to a third-party company who will then bill the patients. Well, that's sending PHI. And so you're opening up yourself.
And PHI is personal health information, right?
Personal health information. And so that clinic, that doctor's office is opening up themselves if that third-party medical billing company gets hit. And so you need to be comfortable with what that third-party medical company has in place in terms of security. In the event they do get hit, you want them paying for the notifications, not you. Because under the breach notification rule, if a business associate gets hit, all they have to do is notify the covered entity that they were impacted, that there was a breach, and here's a list of the individuals. They don't necessarily need to notify those individuals. And so you can do it contractually. And so we have our clients, when they're looking at their security stance, put that into your contracts. Make sure that you are insulating yourself from harm that could come as a result of one of these third-party vendors getting hit, because it's a real problem.
So notification procedures and requirement to notify is put in the contracts. What do those clauses usually look like? A good one.
It's just, it could be as simple as, in the event that a business associate has sustained a breach, they are responsible for all individual and regulatory notifications. Something as simple as that, just to put the onus on that business associate to actually incur that cost and get those notices out the door. When those notices go out the door and they're sent by the business associate and it has the business associate's name on it, that covered entity is not only getting rid of those notification costs, but any arrows for the people that are reading these, for the class action lawsuits that are potentially coming down the line. That points the arrows back to the business associate instead of the covered entity. If OCR comes knocking on the door and wanting to do an investigation, it'll be pointed towards that business associate, not so much towards the covered entity. So something as simple as that can defray so many costs and headaches in the event of a third-party breach. It's a simple thing to do, but it pays dividends down the road.
And in addition to that, aren't there clauses that require maybe your vendors to notify you if you have a breach or suspicion of a breach?
That's interesting. Gosh, 5 years ago, when this was a smaller problem, 10 years ago, we never would see this ever in contracts. And so basically you were looking towards state data breach notification statutes. If it wasn't there, fantastic. Now, because this is happening so frequently, you are having a lot of companies, in particular, I know we were talking earlier about the large companies, the larger companies who are concerned about their data being impacted, they're putting notice provisions in contracts. And so now when companies get hit with ransomware attacks, you obviously need to look at the federal and state laws, but you also need to look through your contracts because there are notification clauses being put in there. And some of them say in the event of a breach, which breaches can typically be defined as, acquisition or access of sensitive data. But some are even going beyond that and saying, in the event of a cybersecurity incident, which is much more broad than a breach, that they need to be notified. And so companies have started putting those in contracts just so they're aware of what's going on with their third-party vendors.
And what are you seeing about cyber insurance? Are people putting that into contracts with their vendors, that they require them to have cyber insurance?
I haven't seen that yet, but it's a great other parts of contracts. I think you should start doing it as part of these types of situations, just because every company needs to have cyber insurance and they need to have sufficient policy limits, and no one thinks it's going to hit them. And then they have no idea how expensive these things can be, right? You have the forensic investigation costs, you have the lawyer fees, you have the restoration fees can be outrageous. And so that's not even getting into notification and potential class action lawsuits and all of that. So you definitely need to get protected. And I think having your third parties vendors protected as well, knowing that there is a policy there that in the event that they're hit, they're not just going to go bankrupt, that they can draw on an insurance policy. That's a very good idea to keep that and put in those provisions as well.
Where they're trying to protect that investment in that company because one breach could wipe that entire bank account out.
Yep.
And the lender is just out of luck.
Absolutely.
But the United Healthcare hack, they got in with stolen credentials, right? There was no MFA on this one system, right?
That's my understanding. That's what leadership from United Healthcare had to say in front of Congress. And I know there was audible gasps from about the 4 people in the room who knew what multi-factor authentication was. Everybody else said, "What's MFA? Is that a baseball play? What is that?" But it was
a big company, right?
Very big company, very fundamental.
100 billion in total worth.
Oh, north of that. North of that. So, and to Ross's point, a pound of recovery for a teaspoon of cure, right? The things we're talking about on the front end that can mitigate a lot of these expenses, whether it's cyber insurance, whether it's assigning liability appropriately in business relationships, or any technical things such as multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection and response, making sure that you have your data and your backup in the event of a ransomware event on your primary environment. These things cost pennies compared to the downstream effects. And certainly we saw that with United Healthcare. The last thing I think any of us want is to see organizations that are currently doing business with the United Healthcares of the world, JP Morgan, all the Fortune 500s. Those companies now are auditing their vendors and asking these security questionnaires and assigning liability. It's becoming, we're seeing a large number of these where you're being required to both improve your security and improve your risk management from a policy and insurance perspective. The last thing I want to see is any small business lose one of these accounts with a FedEx or whomever. So the one thing I want to make sure for all your listeners to understand is, while all this stuff sounds complicated, we all have a lot of acronyms in our industry and there's a lot of expertise, obviously, but it's not nearly as expensive as you're thinking. If you're that small business with even 5 employees, appropriately safeguarding your organization it's not millions, it's not hundreds of thousands, it's certainly south of that. So very affordable. And now we get the opportunity through better security to enable new business opportunities, whether it's with a Fortune 500 or the Department of Defense or a government contract that requires these security things. You're starting to get some return on investment because now our clients can win those contracts. Now all these major companies are doing these vendor risk management processes and auditing their supply chains. So hundreds of thousands of small companies end up with a checklist of send us your latest pen test. Oh, we've never done that before. Send us your vulnerability report. Send us your IR plan. Send us all those kinds of things that you do day in and day out. A lot of people have to catch up when regulations hit, but this is a super regulation where it's coming down from all the Fortune 500s, obviously the DoD space, and being that seemingly is what happened at United Healthcare and how Change Healthcare was affected. I think that's where the connection makes it really interesting for the SMB and mid-market. Mike, have you seen a lot of these supply chains or questionnaires come down for your clients where Fortune 500s are asking about smaller organizations?
I love it. One of the challenges that I see a lot, like CPA firms, Ross, this isn't directed to you, but law firms or to smaller practice, they'll have Microsoft Exchange hosted on site, running an end of life OS. And I was like, that you're going to be held liable. And I get a lot of pushback because they think that cyber insurance and cybersecurity is really expensive. And if you say it a lot, I like the idea of just having SOPs and checklists all the way down the line. So when you do get a major contract, or there's people out there putting RFPs that they specifically state in the RFP that they have certain requirements for cybersecurity, because we're living in an age where every company is the data. That's it. And you've got to protect your data. That is the currency.
The interesting part too is we've seen, I think most people kind of shy away from insurance and think insurance companies, they kind of look at it in terms of auto insurance companies where they're trying to avoid paying for anything. Cyber insurance is completely different. And the groups that we work with a lot, not only are they your insurance company, but they're also looking out, right? And so they're constantly looking at their insurance, seeing if there's any vulnerabilities that they see. And I can't tell you how many times we've had insurance companies actually reach out to the insured, say, "Hey, you're vulnerable here." And we've actually been able to get in and stop something before it happened. And so, yes, you are getting insured. You're covering yourself in the event that something bad happens. But it's almost like you're also protecting yourself too on the front end, and that these companies are they're great to work with. It is not like the auto industry, the auto insurance industry. They're easy to work with. They're looking out for your best interest. In the event that something happens, they're not looking to cheap out. They're looking to get you the best groups available, get in there and quickly get you back up and running. And so I think there's kind of a mindset shift there that you're buying more than just insurance when you get yourself an insurance policy.
Get bigger and bigger is that the cyber insurance industry is more proactive than any other insurance. They are paying upfront for you to, and sometimes upgrade your systems. They're doing analysis for you. They're doing threat detection for you 24/7, notifying you if there's possible incidences that could affect you. And then in the case that you have a breach, they're bringing in the entire team, people like Ross at Lewis Brisboe's. Say that right?
Brisboy, but it's all right.
Brisboy.
Yeah, Brisboy. All good.
Boy, you're my Brisboy. And they're also requiring people like Matt to come in and do pen testing, if you don't have that already, or giving discounts for people that get regular pen tests. Going back to United Healthcare, I just wanted to highlight some of the numbers that I researched. The hackers, Black Cat, Alpha B, were able to steal 6 terabytes of data, which was over 100 million records. They paid 22 million ransom, and like you said, that didn't solve their problems. They still had a lot of issues after even paying the ransom because they were reinfected.
Quick point on that, Joe. After they paid, a lot of these ransomware gangs work as like referral, and there's subsidiaries and advanced businesses. But anyway, there was 2 ransomware gangs that worked together on the attack, and one of them did not get their 10% referral fee or initial compromise fee. So there was a subsequent. That's speculated to be the reason why there was a reinfection. And there was bad blood between the 2 groups. I think it's called like Alpha and Black Cat, but they also, I believe, ended up disbanding and rebranding, coming back out.
Yeah, where's the honor between thieves, right?
If you're not looking out for your gang members.
Yeah, so there's a couple layers, right? There's the access brokers, the people that get in, and then there's the guys that actually handle franchise owners that create the ransomware software and run the the marketing or something like that for like the franchise. Or they have like the centers that you can access and the back end, hacking. It's all very organized. And one number I saw that was kind of crazy was the hospitals that were affected by this were losing $100 million a day of lost business due to this one hack. So this hack was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in U.S. history. And with recent news, with the CEO Brian Thompson getting killed in broad daylight in New York, there's more interesting connections with this hack. Did you guys read anything on that?
I did read about timing of some executive compensation where people were selling shares during the period or right before the period where the incident was uncovered. But it looked like it had been announced in advance, and everything looks nefarious when the incident happens. So everything in hindsight looks, this must have been a conspiracy. It was probably people selling shares because they needed to pay some bills. But there was a lot of speculation of, was this insider trading? And I believe there was an investigation into that, was one thing I saw. What else did you see, Joe?
There There was an insider trading investigation from when they were first being looked at by the DOJ. Some of the executives sold stock before they announced that they were being investigated, including Brian Thompson. And then there was a report that Nancy Pelosi, this is the Nancy Pelosi connection here.
So it's interesting.
She bought 14 million in call options to Palo Alto Networks on the day that they were hacked. And she later made $32 million on that trade. And that was before the hack was even announced that she bought this. So that's pretty suspicious in my opinion. But interesting connections. Like Brian Thompson's grandpa was like business with Nancy Pelosi's, some kind of connection that way. So I don't know. Like I like to
put the blue light glasses on for this
Right.
conversation, but I'm not exactly sure where this is heading.
Well, I think that there was some kind of investigation going on, right? Where maybe Brian Thompson would have to talk under oath, and maybe this situation might have come up, and it's possible that was not working alone, and that this was a planned hit to keep Brian Thompson quiet.
Well, I'll tell you what I have seen is I've heard firsthand incidents where these ransomware gangs are making so much money that they do have people within communities. One business owner who was just being terrorized by people who got access to her iCloud, her email, and then were taking money out of her business account little by little because there were some limits on it, but they struggled to get the attacker out of her accounts. They were intercepting mail in her mailbox. Terrifying. And stealing, grabbing the new debit and credit cards, and then they'd call in and they had the legitimate information that she did not even have, so she couldn't prove it. And I have a COVID story of a life insurance company was mailing out policies during COVID, like right when COVID started, couldn't deliver them in person anymore, so they started mailing the written policies. A friend of mine's a life insurance broker and told me this story. His client, someone stole the policies off of their porch. They called in to the call center and got the beneficiary changed.
Oh, that's horrible.
On their life insurance policies. Jeez. And luckily he caught it when he got notified as the agent that, why isn't the spouse the beneficiary anymore? Who is this person? The clients knew nothing about it. And yeah, they got the police involved quickly because somebody had literally a multi-million-dollar ransom over their heads through the life insurance policy. So, and going back historically, people have stolen credit card information. This used to be prior to ransomware. This is where the majority of money was made. Stealing credit cards, putting them on a new mag stripe on a credit card, and then they would give them out and people would go buy stuff. They'd sell it on eBay and make their profits that way. That was a multi-billion-dollar industry. Yeah. So we've seen it before where people among the, within your city, town, state are physically involved. So cyber just becomes one more area of risk management. We got to understand that there's a lot of people on the other side that are making their money off these types of activities.
The man-in-the-middle attacks are really hard to find too, because it's essentially what they're doing, and then where are they at? So you could have a man-in-the-middle attack where that person's in Pakistan, but the attack is going from two people within San Diego. So those are hard to track down.
I know we're running out of time here, but I wanted to see if you, Ross, could just kind of go over like what legal protections companies can go through in order to like be prepared in case they get hacked, and what they should do if they get hacked, because breach counsel should be at least be the first or second call.
Yeah. So, I mean, typically what we like to advise clients is to have an incident response plan in place, right? And so when things like this happen, it's normally the worst day of your professional career. People are running around frantic. If you don't have a game plan for this, it's going to be a lot harder. So yes, we recommend being proactive, reaching out. We just like a number of other law firms and companies can put together an incident response plan. It'll have everything on there so that in the event that this happens, you open it up, see step 1, call breach counsel. Step 2, notify your insurance carrier. It'll have the policy number on so that everything can get going. Obviously have cybersecurity insurance. That's a major have. In terms of protecting yourself, I think going through the incident response plan process will kind of identify some things that, hey, we need to make sure that these vendors have protections in place. We need to make sure we have, our EDR not only in place, but actually in place across the entire network.
Yeah.
We've seen instances where, you say, oh yeah, we have Sentinel in place. Like, okay, well, you didn't have it on that one server that got hit. And then once they got in, they took everything. So, same thing with MFA. And I know I'm probably getting in Matt's wheelhouse here, but, having MFA in place and actually enforced for everyone in the group, similar to the EDR rollout, we've seen a lot of instances, for instance, healthcare providers where, or law firms where they have MFA enforced for everyone except for, okay, well, there's this one, older partner who doesn't want MFA on their account. It's like, well, guess how they got in through that account.
Yeah.
And so I think just thinking proactively, thinking, hey, and that starts with getting an incident response plan in place. It's cheaper than you think, and it makes you think of your vulnerabilities and how you game plan, once an incident happens.
Great. Matt, you want to fill in, where you guys come in?
Absolutely. And I think the right place to do all of this for the SMB owner, the mid-market account owner that wears a million hats, and I'm sure the last thing they want to do is get into the cybersecurity management industry, is use your annual insurance renewal as the opportunity to review all of this. Cyber risk management is not as complex as it sounds. Well, in the technical details, obviously, it gets pretty granular, but at a high level, what you need to do is have a great cyber insurance policy that's going to cover your business to help recover and to help fill in the gaps where if you're not getting paid for 6 months, my insurance policy is helping pay for us to stay operational during that time. So cyber insurance, have a cyber risk management plan, have a risk management strategy that's written, that we can follow and is our source of truth, that we can use to defend ourselves if we ever end up in a courtroom following one of these incidents, and can be our guiding post. So we're also not wasting money on unnecessary tools. And then 3, use both of those. Use your insurance, use your risk management strategy, your privacy strategy. Use that to inform what you're doing on a 24/7 basis, on a day-to-day basis. A lot of things that Ross mentioned and that we've talked about today are things that are not as expensive as you think, in some instances are free to do today, and can save your entire business in the end. That it can be that drastic of a difference between the positions you find yourself in when you have an incident. These things get very expensive very fast. And with hindsight, that's why I'm on this side now, not doing the incident response space anymore. Is I want to be able to inform people of, make these 5 small steps today that don't cost as much as you think, and you can find yourself in a position where you're not spending any money out of pocket. Ransomware events, if you're downstream of United Healthcare and you can't get paid for 3, 4, 5 months, that's always painful. But if you have continuity plans, and if you have an insurer that's paying in the interim, and you've talked to Louis Brisbois about making sure that you don't have any regulatory issues or people you need to report to, it's still painful, but it's not, it's a fraction of the pain, 1% of the pain compared to flying by the seat of your pants and having no financial backing when that incident happens. So use your annual insurance review. Call Joe and use your annual insurance review to look at cyber risk management holistically from a privacy and proactive security standpoint.
And you're taking people through those incident response plans, doing tabletop exercises, kind of running it with them. Is that one of the things you would do?
Yeah, I'll give a free tabletop for your listeners real quick. And I'll talk fast because we could stretch this out for an hour. But you walk into the office on Monday and you can't get on, and all of your emails and servers are locked. What do? So run that scenario for your organization. You get the following Monday, you get into the office and your bank account is missing $500,000. You had 780 in there on Friday, and you're missing $500,000 on Monday. What do? Who are you calling? Where do you go? run those two scenarios for your business. And if you don't have good plans, you need to call Joe.
Yeah, call me.
Turn it into like a Better Call Saul commercial, but
Right.
I mean that insurance
Yeah,
is insurance and risk management is where this all starts.
Yeah, absolutely.
true.
And not all insurance policies are the same quality. One thing that I'm seeing a lot because of the supply chain risk is that insurance companies are limiting your dependent business income on companies that you have written contracts with. So if this company here gets hacked and it affects you, but there's a company in between you two and you don't have a written contract with this person, you could be out of luck, depending on the wording of your policy. So it's definitely something to look into, especially now that we are having these crazy events like CrowdStrike and other downstream incidents with, for example, what we
Let me
talked about
clarify
today,
on that, Joe.
change healthcare.
Let me clarify on that because I've never heard that before. And I want to get Ross's thought on this too. You're saying in some policies, if I have an AWS instance, I would be covered. But if I have a solution provider who's hosting that AWS for me to use, depending on the language, that may or may not be covered in the event of an outage.
It would depend on your contract, I think. Yeah, because
Okay. Yeah, that's important to look
I
into.
would think that if you're using a contractor to access AWS and you can't access that service, that's part of their service, covered. But I'm thinking more like Change Healthcare, because yes, Change Healthcare was breached, but a lot of these doctors' offices did not have contracts with Change Healthcare. They were down the line maybe two or three iterations, right? So because of that, and other incidents like that, like take like Snowflake, for example, we're having these major cloud outages just because like they're out. You may not have a contract with Snowflake, but you can't operate because this data is gone. So I don't know. It's fun to go through hypotheticals, but it all depends on actual details of whether things are covered or not. In my experience, insurance companies are looking for a way to pay for your incident. They're trying to find coverage in the policy. And I've called in a number of claims that I thought, well, I managed expectations, of course, but I thought would not be covered, and they found a way to cover it. Yeah, one example is one of my clients was caught up in a Ponzi scheme where they were backing these payment processing loans. And the guy ended up just like taking off with the money, paying them back 20%. But then after a while, just like stopped paying them back. And he was able to claw that money back under social engineering coverage. So yeah, the wording that we saw is usually pretty broad. And like you guys said, you're not getting by with anybody that's going to charge you less than like $400, $500 an hour in the incident response, the forensics, or the attorneys. So it's definitely worth it, even if you're having a small breach to do that. And one more question for Louis Brisbois. Ross, do you guys do like retainers with companies? So if they do have a breach, they're ready to go with you guys and they don't have to do all that paperwork?
Yeah, no, we do that all the time where, again, it can be part of an incident response plan where we can write that into the incident response plan just so you have it. Or some companies like to get everything squared away beforehand, make sure we have no conflicts and get involved just in the event that something happens. Not only do they have our contact information, but they have a relationship and they feel comfortable with who is their breach counsel. And so we do that all the time.
Great. And how can people find you, Ross?
Yeah, you can look us up, lewisbrisbois.com. My cell phone number is 504-235-2681. That's the phone I typically use just because in this line of business, that's how we get in contact. Or, email ross.molina@lewisbrisbois.com.
Awesome. And how about you, Matt?
OptimizeCyber.com is the best way to get a hold of us. There's an intake form on there. Call you right back with our contact us.
And how do you spell Optimize on that?
Optimize, OPTIMIZE, cyber, CYBER.com.
Okay.
On an unrelated note, when we started this company a few years back, could not believe that domain was available as cheaply as we got it. So yeah, OptimizeCyber.com.
Great, guys. Mike, you have anything to bring us home?
To bring us home? No. I see what I'm putting into We touched on all the good things. It's just the simple things will go a long way, like MFA, like making sure everything's updated. The only thing that I would add is audit your IT provider and make sure that they're in compliance and make sure that they're hitting all the marks.
And how do people get a hold of you, Mike?
Just rapidscale.net, or you can just call me directly, 619-822-0595.
Great. And Joe, C3 Insurance/cyber is the best way to interact with us, or you can find me on the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, even TikTok. I'm really cool.
There's an answer on there. A vulnerable insurance guy.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait to viral. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on the show, taking the time, and I wish you guys a great 2025, and we'll talk soon.
All right, guys.